do not want to pick up the phone at all costs. I barely want to call my dentist. So like I want to be able to self-serve wherever possible. And one of the challenges that we see with self-service is that it's one thing to tell someone how to do something, but it's a lot more empowering to be able to do that on their behalf. So that's what we're going to walk through today. Um, our customers are facing a lot of different challenges today, and it's satisfaction, it's long backlogs of tickets, it's first response and resolution times. They have complex processes that cost a ton of money and a ton of time, and so these are all problems that we're aiming to solve by automating some of these business processes. Now, as Matrick kind of pointed out, FAQs are generally just a fraction of the information that your customers are going to need when they interact with your business. And a lot of the time when we talk to our customers and as part of like our pre-sales motion is at most it will cover maybe 50% of the ticket volume that they have today. And so it's really important if you want to break through that ceiling to be able to automate some of these more complex, nuanced business processes that require business logic and baking in different rules. And like as a case in point, if as Matrix showed as well, it's the what customers sees or expect with an example of a return as an example is like, hey, you have 60 days to return this. But underneath of that, what an agent is doing is they're making a ton of decisions. They are using the data that they have about your customer, like what's their lifetime value. If it's like a small order, then maybe we're a little bit more lenient about you not sending it back beforehand. And so there are all these different business rules that we need to bake in. And ultimately, as we were kind of saying, it's really important to automate these complex business processes. I don't want to spend too much time on the slides here because I want to get into the demo, but I think the big question is like, why aren't they automating these complex business processes today? And even if you go on a website, most of the time, if you see like a generative AI chatbot, it's generally still just FAQs that are powering that. And it's generally still just showing you how to do something as opposed to doing it on their behalf. That's powerful and it's a lot better than it was, but there's still a lot of like green grass there. And the reason that they don't do that today is that customers ultimately don't trust AI to solve these complex business processes because of one key thing in AI, which is non-determinism. It's this idea that when you ask a question to AI, it can get to 1,000 different places. You can ask the same question over and over again, and it may not answer it the exact same way every time. It's just because it's predicting that next piece of text. It might end up in a completely different place. At a company I used to work for, we had a customer that they wanted to do order cancellation. And there are like 4 APIs that you have to hit in a row in order to do that. And it would generally get there, but it would miss all the steps or not perform consistently along those lines because even though it has it all laid out in front of it, it's not, you're giving it that wiggle room to find its own path to the solution. So this is where we really want to change that for our customers. And it's honestly almost a degradation over rules-based, like what do you call like scripted chatbots, because there you knew that there were 4 or 5 outcomes if someone asked about a return. So we could actually automate complex business processes. They had their own problems, but you knew the paths that they would get to and your business could trust that. So there was a bit of a degradation when people moved over to generative AI. I won't spend time on this. So let's consider a complex business process. At Zowie, we work with a lot of e-commerce customers that have the same type of thing, which is returns. One of the big things that a lot of customers need to do is, first you're trying to figure out who they are, what their orders are, which order that is. And then this is where things get a little bit interesting. They say, well, my business goal is to turn returns into exchanges or to turn returns into other outcomes. So there's another, even though there's a process in place, you need to be able to influence those outcomes a little bit more as well. And then it's figuring out, is it one item in the order? Is it the entire order? Can I generate a shipping label on their behalf? What's the process look like after they return and then we exchange something? So it ends up being really complicated really quickly. And this is the process we're going to look at automating today, just as much as we can in the time. And ultimately, our businesses that we work with expect 100% precision on these issues, right? Like you can't really miss, or that's huge amounts of revenue that's lost by your business or not saved by your business as well. The solution that we've kind of come up with at Zowie is this idea of an AI engine. And so the way that I would think about this is imagine that you have, if you're a developer, it's like the idea of microservices, where you have one block that does one action. That action has one way in and a couple of outcomes that can come out of it, like those 4 different options for a return. And the LLM just works inside of that little box, and it doesn't make the decision of A out or A in and B out. So really it's able to use things like if someone says something weird like, hey, what's your email address? And they go, my email address is this. The old world of chatbot would really fail with that because it'd be like, well, that's not a valid email, even though it's in there. Now, by using an engine, you're able to make sure that the LLM extracts the right information from it, but the process is still followed every time because it's not generative AI that owns the process. Generative AI is owning pieces of the process. So it's like a little worker in that train. So we'll get into what this looks like in the back end, but you'll see it's like this flow-based decision-making process where we're collecting information from our customers. We're hitting back-end systems, which is, as we were mentioning before, that's why you can start trusting it a little bit more, because it's still deterministic code that's ultimately pulling or pushing information, and it's not this non-deterministic AI that's owning that piece of the puzzle. So we really want to take the best of both worlds in order to be able to do this. And then there was a question before about some of the processes that we see our customers solving based on this today. So a couple of examples of how some of our customers are solving that. We're going to go through one today, but just something I wanted to call out for the team around, like, you know, this is how they're doing with it. These are the kinds of things that we're looking at as well. And we're really helping our customers move up that resolution ladder over time as well. Okay, I'll get into it here. We're going to do this demo in 2 parts. We're going to kind of warm ourselves up, get ourselves acquainted with generative AI and building a bit. We're going to do like a simple FAQ, and then we're going to dive into the processes and how we can start how we can start automating returns a little bit more effectively. All right. So let's start here, and I apologize for my tab freezer. But we are going to work on this brand, Althea. So this is a brand that we kind of made up at Zowie that is a wellness brand. We want to use this as an example so that we can start, you know, building generative AI against it. And there are a couple of things that are important on here in order to start our AI agent. So we talked a little bit about policies, and the other side of that is going to be products. So, you know, customer support often bleeds into like this product education, product recommendation space as well. So I've put together 2 documents here that cover some of Althea's policies. We're going to bring these into our AI agent, and we're going to start asking some questions to get going. Now, just to familiarize ourselves a little bit with the back end of Zowie here, there was a question previously around persona. And so this is where we start to be able to define that persona for our business. So we provide some business context about it for the sake of the brand. We didn't get too specific on this one, but a lot of our customers are kind of providing some examples of, you know, what kinds of questions or topics you should be answering and what you shouldn't. They're providing background on the business so that it understands some of that history, all really in the aims of making sure that we can really portray like your voice of customer. And then we're also going to describe like tone of voice. So there was a question previously there about that tone of voice, how we think about that. We can define it once here. It's, we think about how long answers should be. We think about the, empathy matching, whatever that may be. And then there's the other tool we have in the background, which is the guidance, where you can start tone matching based on what customers ask as well. So just something as a preamble here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of information. I've added some information about our Althea products. So just a couple of the examples here. And we're going to move in our Althea policies as well. And I'm just going to create that. And I'm just going to call that Althea policies. And now we have two pretty comprehensive sets of data that will help our AI agent answer questions from that FAQ perspective. We'll dive over to our knowledge section and we're going to enable this. The reason that we do this is that we have this idea of being able to limit information to regions or segments. So the classic example I always think of is like your Airbnb. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Something you guys do a lot of more of a RAG model than fine tuning. Did you say that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both for sure. At the end of the day, like RAG is kind of the essence of how we can make sure that we stay grounded in fact, and so that we make sure that our customers, aren't negotiating us down to a $1 Ford F-150 or whatever else that may be, as well as some degree of fine tuning as well to ensure that we can influence afterwards. Cool. So we've enabled some knowledge. We have our AI agent available now. I'm just going to make sure that it's the right one on here. Give me 1 sec. It's a bit tricky at times. Cool. So we've got our AI agent. And now I can ask something like, what would you recommend for sleep, as an example. Now our AI agent is going to use that RAG element to be able to pull out the relevant pieces of knowledge. The more detailed, the better. And then provide them with information about some of the products that we would recommend in that situation. Cool. So that's a very basic FAQ that we've automated at this point. What I want to spend the most of our time on today is the idea of a business process automation. So I've kind of built it out in advance, but we're going to build a little bit of it as well. So the idea here is that we're going to build out our returns and exchanges process today. So you'll see that there are a number of steps that we're going to bring our AI agent through in order to really ensure that we push them toward the right process, help them with this combination of like deterministic code and the LLM being able to collect information. So how this is going to work is we're going to start by collecting a customer's email address. We're then going to hit a piece of code, and I don't want to scare people away by saying like hitting a piece of code here. What's really important here is that we want to work with your teams to be able to hit APIs, to be able to automate some of these complex business processes that are beyond just needing like information. You need systems to work with, data to pull and push from. So those are some of the reasons that we're going to use some code today. And ultimately, like we want to enable your teams to be able to work with that, as well as our team was always there to work with you on that as well. So we're going to pull from an order management service and be able to pull out some of their most recent orders. We're going to get our customer to then narrow down to the right order. So if they have multiple orders with you, figuring out which one it is. We're going to prompt our customer towards a refund or an exchange. We're then going to process that return by hitting that system again. And then we're going to provide our customer with information based on that order status or that return status as well. So that's basically what we're going to walk through today. Any questions so far? Cool. I am just going to change my screen here for a second because I want to extend. So just give me 1 sec. Just give me 1 second here as I figure out how to extend. Whatever. Okay, that's fine. We're going to just open another window and do it that way then. All right. So the first thing we're going to do here is we are going to jump in and we're going to start building out with our Zowie engine. So we're going to create a new process and exchanges. And we're going to kind of live demo this as we go. So the first thing we need to do is we're going to add a block. And I'm going to kind of keep referring back to the one that I built to make sure I don't miss anything. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add our data input gather. What we're going to aim to do is we're going to collect this piece of information from our customer. In this case, we're going to collect our email address. And then we'll save that. And let me just jump back over. I'm going to add one more step here. And we're going to make this one the start. And here we have this ability to, we're going to greet our customer. And here's where we start to see the combination of non-determinism and determinism. So here we can teach the LLM how to start this conversation, or we could also just provide like a raw message that we can provide to our customer here in order to start off this process. I'm going to go with this answer here, and I'm going to say, I'm happy to help you with your return. Then we have this ability to wait. So if we're looking for a customer to say something first before we proceed, we'll set that up here. And then we're going to collect this new piece of information. We're going to save it, and we're collecting our email address. So if we save our experience at this point, we can now, I'm just going to go over to my automations where we're going to basically like point our Zowie engine. This is, and now what's going to happen is that when we go over to this conversation, I'll just start a new one. And I'd say, I'd like to start a return. What's going to happen is that it's going to start through that process. Now, this is the intelligent part of the LLM, is that if I go something like Ryan, Morgan at Zowie.ai, our AI knows that that's not a valid email address. This is not something that we needed to train inherently. This is where our LLM is able to start recognizing some of these pieces that are really important without you needing to think about it. So now if I provide it a valid email address, it's going to move through this process. Now, we've only built out one piece here, so it is going to get stuck, but we'll continue with our build. So just a really simple process of being able to ask this customer and then collect information. The other important piece here is that for any of these processes, there's this idea of failure. So we can exit these processes at any point if someone is struggling, if something goes awry, whatever that is. And it's another way that businesses can really start to trust that the AI can eject from these sequences and get them over to a human agent or whatever else that will be. And so that's how we start really helping build trust with these organizations. So now that we are collected that email address, I'm going to steal this code and we're going to start to add that to our process here. I'm going to jump back into our Zowie engine and we're going to add another piece here. We're going to add a script. We're going to paste that in. What's important is that it's pulling just a couple of pieces of previous orders that this customer has had. From there, we are going to, all right, I'll save that. And we're going to have the next step go into our script. So now it's going to be able to pull from the order management service now that we have refined this and we know our customer's email address. From there, our next step is going to be around trying to get our customer to narrow down the next, which order it is. Another place where we want our LLM to take a part in this. So it has all this information about the orders, and now it needs to be able to pick out the right one. So we're going to ask the LLM to help us do that. We're going to grab this from our LLM. We're going to add another data input gatherer, or sorry, another user message here. This is where we tell the LLM to collect a piece of information. And what it's doing is it's taking all of the orders out of this order management service. From there, new user message, and we'll have the next steps here. So we'll pause again for a second. Let's run through our return process one more time as we've started tacking on more pieces here. So I'm going to say something like, I'd like to start a return. I'm going to provide it with my email address. Now it's pulling the orders from that service. Sometimes the formatting is a little ugly. This is where we can start to prompt it a little bit further as well. But we're going to provide it with information and say, I'd like to order this one. So I'm going to go with order 14456. Our LLM is now going to be able to tell us that it found that order. So this is our next piece. We've started pulling from that order service to start narrowing down. Any questions so far? Is this making sense to people? Okay, great. So now that we have narrowed it down, our LLM is going to get you to do that refund or the exchange. So we're going to ask our customer to do so.
You're just connecting to like their CRM.
Yep. Yeah. So if you think of like an e-commerce business like this, it's generally like a two-system kind of thing. You'd pull orders from something like Shopify, then you'd push a return into something like a Loop Returns. Anything with an API is kind of fair game, but this also kind of one of the reasons that we think about automating these complex business processes is that they often require multiple systems that sometimes don't speak very well to each other otherwise. So we can use the LLM in there to kind of tune and clean up that data in the meantime to make it more compatible with the next step. Cool. With that being said, we'll build out our next block here. Again, we're going to get that next user message. I'm going to pull some information back. So here we're helping our customer determine whether it's a exchange or return. So what's going to be important here is part of the prompting. This is where you can start to influence the business process a little bit more. So it's easy for us to say like, hey, what do they want, A or B? But you can also now teach the AI agent to say, hey, say sorry to the customer, let them know you're trying to let them get the right item, encourage the exchange, whatever else that may be, to really help influence that process as well. From there, we're going to move that over. Return or exchange. Again, we'll save that. We're going to point towards the return or the exchange. And now our customer will be asked whether they want to have a return. So they have, at this point, given their email, they have pulled their orders, we've determined which is the right order, and now we're trying to determine what they want to do with it and encouraging them in one direction or the other. From there, we're going to execute another piece of code, which is going to help them with that return processing. So again, this would hit a system like a loop returns, whatever else that would be, in order to do that on their behalf. We're going to pull that in. I'm going to call this execute return. Now, we only built out one permutation here, which is going along the lines of a return as opposed to an exchange. So in real life, you'd kind of branch a little bit more here to like get them into the right bucket. Yeah.
Is it always one way? You have chain that goes single direction?
No, often if something fails, you can point it back to previous portions in the process as well. So if someone like gets in a loop where, you say like, hey, this item isn't eligible for return. Is there another item that you're considering or something like that? Then we loop it back to the place where we can then do that part of the process again. The other cool thing that our team has designed is that like these processes are often interchangeable and like components of them need to be called at certain times. So we have this idea of being able to call different other processes, pull their data, jump over to other processes so that these are not just existing in isolation, but they're kind of like an interconnected ecosystem of business processes. Does that help? Cool. With that being said, we have now executed the return. We're going to point our LLM to that, and we're going to save. We now have 6 of our 9 steps here. Next, we're going to provide our customer with that return confirmation. So all the information that's coming out of our process return, we're then telling the LLM that it can use that information in order to communicate to our customer. So again, where we don't have to say like, show them field 1, 2, and 3 in this format, we're saying, here's the information, provide them with this, and it's a little bit less structured and easier for a customer. At this point again, we're going to pull in our user message. We're going to communicate the return. And we're going to save that. Now we're going to point our execute return over our to communicate return. And we are almost done. Now the last step is pretty simple. It's this idea of finishing. So we don't want a customer to be stuck in one of these processes. We want to ensure that once they finish something, they can exit and have another intent. So we're going to point over to the finish. I'm going to save that. And I do realize that I forgot one piece of code, which is this one. So I'm just going to add one more block. It's going to live after our order management. It's basically saving this as a variable as well. So I'm going to import here. We're going to go from that into new user message. And we're going to move you over to new script. Okay. So just like that, I know that I've simplified it a lot, but we've created our business process here. So we've now, again, we've collected, we're helping our customer with their return. We're collecting the email address. Obviously for you guys, if this is something you do, we're collecting zip code, order number, those kinds of things to narrow it down as well. We're then calling on this order management service. We're helping our customer decide what order it is. We're determining if it's a return or an exchange. We're going to process that return and then communicate that with the customer. So from there, let's try it out. I'm going to say I'd like to start a return. From there, again, we're going to ask for the email address. We're going to pull their orders. We're going to provide them with these 2 orders. I'm going to say it's board 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Another way that the LLM is able to extract the information that we need in this situation. And then again, based on the prompting, we have prompted our customer to say, hey, like, can we exchange the item for you instead, to help really influence this business process as well. In this case, I'm going to say, okay, exchange. Then from there, we would hit that API, which would initiate the return, and then provide them with a link to their exchange status, their shipping label, and whatever else that they would need in the situation. And just like that, it's being able to really be able to rely on the precision of executing all of these little steps in order every time, while still being able to take advantage of an LLM, which is how we're really helping those customers like hit that 50, 60, 70% automation in these processes as well. That's most of what I wanted to show from the business process perspective. Any questions at all about how any of that worked in the back end at all? Okay, cool. Oh, yeah, hit me.
So you mentioned like you can connect to anything with APIs.
Mhm.
Is there anything that doesn't have APIs you can also connect to?
I think that like it depends on what you want to do. Like if, for instance, like prompting the LLM to decide between an exchange and a return doesn't need an API because it's just a like a business decision that we're making. So if you want to make business decisions like that, we can do it without needing an API. The API is really like if you have a system of record for something, for either pulling information so we know something about a customer or pushing information back so that we can do something on their behalf. Those are the only times the APIs are really needed. Yeah.
So does this do like can it do voice responses as well? Like, you know, because I was just playing around with the LLM that you had on the Groove Life or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And like I asked it like, you know, what is Groove Life? And like it gave me an answer, like, you know, told me like, you know, oh, we specialize in this and that. Like, so it almost becomes like a marketing or a sales tool as well, right? Because people might use it for other things and just like, oh, I want a technical question.
Mm-hmm.
They might want suggestions for things. So does it, and then some like that personalization. So is this able to speak the answers as well? You know, like read it back to me. Like what if like, or if I'm blind, I can't read. Like how does it?
Yeah, couple of different pieces in there. From a personalization perspective, yes, you can pull information. There are two main ways we do it. It's like the one is if you're logged in on the site, we pass a bunch of data into the chat to begin with. So it's like I know who Ryan is. I know what orders he has. I can anticipate some of these needs. And like if you're a SaaS business, as an example, it's actually we've seen this be like a big like enhancement for their subscription as well, because they can say, oh, if you're a premium member, then when you talk to the chatbot, we're actually going to send you straight to an agent, or we're going to make it more lenient about sending you to an agent, as opposed to someone that's a more standard member. You only get ticketing, or you have a different experience. So that's one way that we've done it. From the voice perspective, we operate right now on like any social channel, any email, chat. Voice is our next thing. So we're gonna have like a phone AI agent that will be able to do that, as well as what you're talking about too, which is like being able to speak into the chat element as well. And Maciek, if there's anything you wanted to add, like with vision.
Sorry, agent for voice is something that we're launching in Q3, and we're also launching our new version of the chat widget that will have built-in text-to-speech and speech-to-text technology. So you'll be able to have a dictation and get everything read out to you. But we'll also be integrating like this mode like ChatGPT has, that you just turn on the button, you can like have the live translation. Like from Zawi vision, we believe that the future is voice, but not the voice over the phone line, but the voice with any kind of interface of the camera. And this is where we're heading. And what Ryan showed you is that like this process builder is like how we can make sure that our customers can automate complex business processes, but the value that we're using LLM at every stage, we're not writing a message here. Like we're not really like scripting this. Like at every stage, we're just providing the guidance for the AI agent how to behave. So we are making sure that every stage of the process it works in this very limited environment. So there is no space for hallucination or wrong decision. Decision is made by the engine, and as it flows, what you will be able to do is you can define different persona per channel. And then for the chat, you will say like write a short messages, you're the chat channel, but for the email channel, we'll have a different persona. And for the voice channel, we'll have a different persona. So at the end of the day, we're getting to this stage that you have one process definition, but it works across all of the channels. And this is where we're getting like, I think that like Q1 we're receiving fully email, and Q2, Q3 we're receiving voice.
Are you guys just doing like your primary thing is like customer support? Or you guys kind of like, is the back end business system that can be used for anything in the business?
I mean, today we're seeing Zawi as empowering consumer communication. I mean, there is a plenty of other great solutions that you should leverage for, that you can leverage for like automating internal processes and so on. So like yeah, today we're like typically focused like B2B2C, when C for us is like we're working with businesses, they're working with their consumers.
Sweet.
Good.
Yeah, I guess back to you then, Patrick, to
Awesome.
close
Thank
us
you
out.
so much, Ryan. And team, thank you so much. Okay, so we'll be around here. We have this venue for you. As I told you, our goal is that just